Welcome to CMS Training with EDUCO. In this video, we'll be showing you how to manage the Nivo slider module on your Drupal site. This is a user-contributed module that may or may not be utilized in your template, but if your site has an editable slideshow, it's most likely being generated by this module. So to access this module, I'm going to go to Structure, Nivo Slider. We currently don't have any images uploaded to our slideshow, so I'm going to upload a new slide image so we can see how this module works. I'm going to Browse and select an image for my desktop. And this image is already in the proper size. It's sized down enough to where it won't be too large of an upload. You want to make sure that the images that you're uploading aren't coming directly from a camera or aren't set to be too large, or the system might have an issue resizing it for the slideshow. So we're going to hit Save Configuration, and that's going to upload our image. So after the image is uploaded, it'll let us know the configuration options have been saved, and we'll see our image in the preview box. We'll also see the title. It's called Image 1, and by default it's published. So as of right now, it would be showing on our slideshow. As we scroll down, you'll see some fields that you can fill out. We'll give this image this slide a title of Man on Mountain. And for the description, we'll just we're actually going to switch this from plain text to full HTML, depending on your site template. The specifications for the caption might be a little bit different, but whatever you put in this description box will generally populate the caption on your site. So I'm going to call this Man on the Mountain, and I'll say this is a slide. And for the Man on the Mountain portion, I want that to be a header 2, so it'll be bigger. And again, you want to, it's most likely that slides will already be in place on your site, so you want to make sure that you follow the caption convention of the slides that already exist. So I'm going to scroll down, and you have the option to link this slide to a URL. You can either link it to an absolute URL for an external link with the HTTP protocol. You can use the front code again, or you can add the alias of a particular page on your site. By adding a link to this box, whenever someone clicks on the image in the slide, it will link to that URL. So I'm going to, for the sake of example, we're going to link this slide to the About Us page. Now below this, we have Show Slide on Specific Pages. This is where you determine which pages this slide would show on. If you are using Nivo Slider to generate multiple slideshows, you can use the wildcard, which will show it on any slide that Nivo Slider, any page that Nivo Slider has a slideshow on. You can also add aliases for particular pages, and you can use wildcards as sub-aliases. You know, you've got a pretty decent description of all the things that you can do with this particular field underneath it. I'm going to use the asterisk wildcard because I want this slide to show on all slideshows. And then finally, we have our transition setting. If you have this set to the default, this slide will transition in the exact same way as all the other slides in your slideshow. You can also set the transition on an individual basis to make your slides transition in a different way. We usually recommend that if you want to change the transition for all slides, instead of changing them individually, you change the default, and we'll show you how to do that in your settings. So I'm going to save this configuration. And now you'll see image 1 has a title, Man on Mountain. And when I look at that image, it's got this title. If I wanted to close out of my Nivo slider right now and let my home page refresh, because I have the Nivo slider displaying on the home page, now that I've added a slide to it, the slideshow appears. You can configure your slider slides now that you have your slideshow actually on the page. You can use your contextual link dropdown to go back to the Nivo slider options, or like we did before, you can access them by going to Structure, Nivo Slider. So we've seen how to upload a new slide and to edit the options on that slide. If we go up to the right-hand side of this overlay, you also see a tab for options. And these are some settings that govern the general display of your slider. So we've got it set now to our default theme. We usually don't recommend playing around with themes because they tend to be set for your particular template, but if you're experimenting, you can play around with the theme. We're also using an image style to generate the slider images. We've got an image style called Slider that will crop and scale our images appropriately so that they're all the same size. And we also just use the thumbnail style for our images, for our image thumbnails. If you click General to drop down, you can see that this setting uses a random starting slide. If you don't want to use a random starting slide, you can select a slide which you want the slideshow to always begin with, 0 being the first slide that you've uploaded and the numbers changing accordingly. You also have your effects options. Right now our transition is set to random, but you can select from a variety of different effects, the most common one being fade. That's the most typical slideshow effect that you'll see. And then we've got some effect properties. If you're using an effect that utilizes slices, you can determine the number of slices. If you're using boxes, you can determine the number of columns and rows. And then we also have our animation speed. This is the time in milliseconds, and it determines how long it takes to transition from one slide to the next. You also have the option to have your slideshow pause animation whenever someone is hovering. That means if someone hovers their mouse over the slide will not advance to the next slide until they move their mouse off of it. So by unticking that, that means that the slide advancement will not be impeded by a mouse over. And finally, if we drop down our navigation, you can see that you can have the option to display the directional navigation, and it lets you know that the display navigation buttons to go back to the previous slide and move forward to the next, those are the arrows. You can also have control navigation. Those are the little buttons underneath the slideshow where you can toggle through the individual slides. You could also use thumbnails. You could disable automatic slide transitions if you wanted people to have to manually navigate through the slides. And finally, we have our pause time. If you're feeling like there's not enough time where the slide pauses on individual where the slideshow pauses on individual slides, if people need more time to read the caption content, you can increase the pause time. Be aware that this pause time is in milliseconds. So once you're done setting up those options, you'll just save that configuration, and you can close out of your overlay, and any changes that you might have made would be applied to your slideshow. In this case, our slide only has one slide, so it won't automatically transition, but you can see slightly those overlay arrows that someone could click on. Those are your previous next arrows, and below the slideshow, that's our control navigation with the little buttons. And if there were additional slides, you would see additional buttons for the slides. And as we said, when we created this slide and linked it to the About Us, if we were to click the picture on this slide, it's going to take us to our About Us page. So that's how you manage and edit your Nivo slider. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.